Woohoo!
Woo! Look at you.
We're broadcasting. How are you, everybody out there? We're live with Audra Erwin, the High on Life coach, and Christopher Rausch, the kick-ass guide to life coach. And I'm Carol Pilkington, spiritual teacher and mentor. I work with people that are in transition, that are in a major life transition. It's very uncomfortable, painful, confusing, and all those other things that go on when we are in transition. I help people work through that. And I'm here to introduce and have a conversation about fear, what fear is all about. So take it away, Audra.
Yay, everybody! It's Audra Erwin, your High on Life coach. I am committed to true, authentic self-expression, and I help people break down the barriers and beliefs, limitations, and labels that keep them from living their true, authentic self-expression. And I'm excited to share these hangouts with my fellow ass clowns and friends. And yay. So yay! Christopher?
Hi, I'm Christopher Rausch, the creator of the Kick-Ass Guide to Life, and I help people overcome their self-created crap without the self-help fluffy bullshit. Just imagine one part Tony Robbins, one part George Carlin, all mixed up at an AC/DC concert, and that's what you get with me. And I'm excited to be here with my co-host to talk about a very, very important topic that I think you are going to find beneficial so that you can take action and live your kick-ass life.
Well, that's a big old vat of awesome sauce if I ever seen one.
Yes, indeedy. Yes, indeedy.
So, folks, we are talking about fear today, and it's something everybody has, right? And experienced at some point in our lives, if not currently or constantly or consistently or at random, right? So it's going to be a fun subject to explore. So, Chris, you were most excited about this subject and this topic, so I think we should start with you today.
Okay. Yeah, fear. Fear. False expectations appearing real, however you want to say the acronym. But it's so interesting because two of the things that I'm most passionate about right now in my coaching and my speaking is overcoming fear and ending procrastination, because I think in determining my brand and what I love helping people to do is really those two things, because those are the things that paralyze us from truly living an amazing life. I mean, you look at people, entrepreneurs or actors or musicians or whoever in your world who's successful, and chances are those are the people that don't really have fears about certain things. I mean, they may have fear of a spider or a snake or stuff like that, but what we're talking about today is rationalized versus unrationalized blockages in your brain about what it is that you're capable of doing. And for me, I know that somewhere, I mean, depending on what stats you look at, 98% of fears are never realized, which is pretty alarming when you think about all the different things that go into what fears are. And for me, I'm passionate about getting to the root cause of what it is, and I'm just excited to see what you guys think also, because when you help somebody overcome their fear and stop procrastinating, I mean, the world just opens up because they get that confidence, and we've talked about confidence before. So yeah, my thing is this is really just identifying what the cause of the fear is, and then taking steps to overcome it. So that's kind of like my initial thoughts on it. You guys?
I think it's a huge topic, and one that we don't often acknowledge and work on. We try and avoid it like the plague. But what I've come to understand and realize and experience is that fear is something that sets in from the moment we encounter another being. So here we are, these beings that come into the world, and we're fresh, raw, clean slate. Some people feel that we come in with stuff. We may, but we don't know what we don't know. until we're here and we encounter another. It's the moment that we encounter another being that we come face to face with our inhibitions, fears, and, you know, all those things. And as we go through life, we're in the midst of those fears, and we reflect one another's, we are reflections of one another. So without another, we wouldn't know whether we have fear or not, right? So it seems natural to me that we would come in, or we would encounter fear along the way, because it's a threat. Another being is sometimes appearing as a threat to our mere existence. And those are the things that we have to work through on many different levels as we go through life.
Yeah, I see fear as just probably the most predominant form of contrast in the universe, right? That it's that energy dynamic that allows us to grow in the grandest way, right? And there's so many dynamics to fear. You know, we have our fight or flight brain response. You know, we have that conditioning in that part of us, you know, that it's built in for our survival. You know, it's just when it takes over the whole hemisphere of our brain, you know, that we have to dance with it. But I've learned, you know, I used to be so mad at fear, like, oh, I hate fear. I'm going to kick your ass, fear, you know. And now it's like I've learned to see it as just that force to be reckoned with, right? So what am I really afraid of? Like having it be that friendly voice that's trying to share with me information and give me feedback. You know, and usually, like I had a client today that I was coaching, and you know, she had a real fear around something, and I said, well, you know, so what? We went right to the root of the fear. Like, well, what if that did happen? Suppose it happened, and it's like, oh, and had a completely different response to what if it happened. So it's just really like facing whatever that is and dissipating the energy around it, like diffusing that energy around it, and it can't like follow you or haunt you. It's just really, we just have to not, like, what is it, Martin Luther King said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, right?
Was that Kennedy? Or was that?
Oh, you know, one of them people.
I think it was Kennedy.
Okay. Well, hell, no, thank you for correcting me. I just know it's true, and it makes sense. So it's when we can, you know, just diffuse, get to the heart of it, like just facing it. It's like putting it to rest and just letting that energy fall away. But it's definitely there for our, you know, it's a built-in modality for either for our protection, for our growth. Anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on it right now.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I put down on my notes on the computer here is that fight or flight thing, because in some situations fear is good because it triggers our adrenaline and it triggers our response. I mean, if we're walking down a dark alley and somebody's behind us and we're afraid, that's when our adrenaline kicks in and we're able to kick ass and haul ass and get the hell out of there. But one of my questions, I was thinking about this, you know, for fears in my life, because I know I'm really not afraid of too much when I think about fear and being afraid, but I wanted to ask you guys, where do you think it starts? Because when I was a kid, for me, there was no fear until something happened, until an event happened, and I have my own thoughts on it. But where did fear start for you guys, and what are you guys afraid of?
Childhood. I think childhood. I think because that's the thing, is we shut down when we have an experience that shuts us down, right? Or creates that fear, because we automatically, it's like it sends this signal to our nervous system like danger, Will Robbins, and then it automatically, you know, it knows whenever that situation surfaces, it's like, oh yeah, you know, it has that defense thing in place. because I think we're fearless when we're kids. Like, I remember just being I would take the stage. I'd be like, bring it on. Kids fall down. They would, let's do that. And but yeah, I think and then what happens is it kind of creates that wiring in our brain of the whole fight or flight survival thing. It's kind of imprinted in our cells, and we have that built-in reference to, that consistently comes up for us to access, so that we default there naturally. But it's like, yeah, the work is to just pause and like really see that there's a pattern. I mean, there's so much work around it, if you so choose to allow it to not rule your life. A lot of people operate out of fear and live in fear, and they don't, do the things to transform that energy dynamic, and it rules their life. Because we're never going to outrun fear. I mean, there's always, I believe, going to have, things that trigger us and create those responses in us. But I'm starting to look at it as like the most awesome form of contrast that I can, that allows me to grow to a new level. And I think the more we do that, the more we change the wiring in our brain, and we start to, realize that that's a new pattern for us, that we're okay. It's going to be okay. And I think there's a whole difference between the whole knowing your spidey senses and having fear, guide you and navigate you and have those boundaries there. And then when it's blocking you, like you said, Christopher, with the whole procrastination and not fulfilling and doing the things that you really deeply desire to do because you're living out of that fear space. Carol?
Well, I'm going to get real specific here. I remember when I was a kid, I was afraid of, I wore sweaters a lot, and so I was afraid of people seeing my perspiration rings when I was in school. I was afraid of not fitting in. I was afraid of not being picked on the team, and I was afraid of being different and being beaten up, and I was afraid of not being liked. I was afraid of going out into the world, and these are fears that I really recognized that I had, especially when it came closer and closer to graduating high school. I was definitely afraid of going out into the world and being out in the world. I felt unsafe. And that was with me for a long time. I was afraid of speaking my mind. I was afraid of telling people what I thought because I felt shut down as a child, and all these different things. So I've been working with the nature of fears and acknowledging them for a very, very long time, and I can say that it's been probably over the last 4 or 5, maybe 6 years that I've really delved into the nature of fear and what it all looks like and what it means to me. And it's a fear of death in some way. I mean, that's the ultimate fear. A lot of people have a fear of death, of actually the physical body dying. We don't realize the level upon layer upon layer of how much we fear death because we're so identified with and as a body. So there are so many layers to this issue, and I just wanted to start laying it out there and getting really specific on the nature of the fears that I've had and that other people might be having. And then maybe later we can talk about how we've been working through and dealing with our fears.
Yeah, and you hit on something, I mean, really specific, Carolyn, which I appreciate, because it's interesting, the conditioning process that we go through as kids. I mean, I think that we're fearless when we're kids. It's like we don't know what the consequence is from a certain action, so we're just like, okay, hey. I mean, you think about kids that are, falling off of, counters and stuff like that, and it's just like, I remember as a kid, I would crawl underneath houses, some of the houses that were raised foundations, and we would, during summertime, we would find where the grates were off, and we would crawl underneath the houses. I had no fear of spiders. I didn't think about getting stuck. I didn't think about bugs being down there. It was just like, okay, or I would climb a tree. I remember I climbed a tree so tall here in California that I could see Knott's Berry Farm from my house. I mean, we used to go find the tallest tree. And now, and then another thing, I used to skateboard. I used to skateboard down freeway overpasses through red lights and stop signs and wouldn't even think about, could a car come over and hit me? And then I think it's that something happens, like you guys were saying, that triggers us to be, okay. And I tell people this, the day you stop being a kid is the day you know you're going to die. So it hits on perfectly what you're saying, because I think about that, and it's like, now it's, okay, now if I ride a skateboard down a hill, there's a possibility I could fall and hurt my hand, or so it's like, okay, I don't want to do that. Not necessarily that I'm afraid of it, but I think there's that something comes about that. But one of the other questions I had, and you just kind of said it, because Carol, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of how I'm going to die. I'm concerned about that. That's why I've been doing a bunch of research on, okay, what happens to our spirit, and is there life after death, and all that other stuff, to kind of help myself be more comfortable with it. But do you guys think anything, and this is going to be a crazy question just popped into my head, do you think anything has to do with possibly past lives that cause our spirit to be afraid of anything? Like, maybe back in the Roman days we were being chased, and now we don't like people chasing us, or I don't know. It's a question that popped into my head right now.
I believe to some degree, for sure, absolutely. Like, people who are afraid of heights and they have no idea why, or they're afraid to fly and they don't know. I mean, there's a lot of unexplained fear that I do believe, is past life. But before, Carol, you add to that, just going back to something you said before you asked that question, Christopher, is I believe a lot of fear primarily comes from programming. I think there's a lot of conditioning going on in the world and programming to keep us in fear-based, operating from that fear-based place. So I just had to add that part, that I think that's contributing. You're like, what's the cause of it, and childhood dynamics, but that's a big piece right there. But yeah, I definitely do think that past lives can contribute a lot to fear that we're not aware of on our subconscious mind can conjure up fears that we're not even aware of. So, Carol?
Yeah, I totally agree. I've been reading a lot about past life, not so much past life, but out-of-body experiences. And somebody that attempts to go out of body can really have a hard time, because our thoughts are instantaneous, and whatever we put out there and whatever our fears are going to come right, or we're going to attract them immediately. And I've experienced that. I have gone out of body, and I did feel an entity coming towards me based on a fear that I had, and I was able to close that off, and that entity went away. So a lot of people are intrigued by out-of-body experiences, and they want to do it. They think it's a great idea, but I have to tell you, you really have to have your fears in check and really understand the nature of your fears before a person does that, because they'll be bombarded with everything that they can imagine. You talk about the boogeyman coming to get you, it will. So yeah, I can totally be on board with that, and I think we do come in with past life stuff, good and bad, whatever we consider good or bad, and they're just additional lessons or continuing lessons that we have to learn in any given life. If we have learned a lesson, then we come in with having learned that lesson from a previous life, and it just is the same thing with lessons of negativity. I don't say that it's bad, but it's just we come in with lessons to learn, and there's a continuity process that occurs, I think.
when I think about fear, it's based on, like you said, something has happened that has and you touched on it before, the judgment thing. I think that's a huge part of it, because we're afraid of getting out of our comfort zones to experience new things, but it's uncomfortable. It's like, okay, what's going to happen, and are people going to judge me? And because I talk to a lot of people about it, and they're just like, well, I'm afraid of stepping out and taking a risk. And I know one of the things that I thought about recently when we I can't remember if I told the story or not, but when we bought this house that we live in now, we were living in my first house, and it was comfortable. We could afford it. Everything was good. If she lost her job or I lost my job, we were good. We were safe. And then we looked to buy this house, and it was a smoking deal. And it's like, okay, now we're gonna have renters, and all these what ifs started polluting my brain. It's like, well, what if we don't have renters? What if you lose your job? What if this? What if this? What if we lose everything? And for me, being homeless is like, I don't want to go back there. And I was like almost paralyzed. I didn't want to do it. It's like, no, I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. And then I thought about all the successful people out there, and what do? They take a risk. They put things on the line, whatever it is, and they believe in themselves so much. And I think that's for me is one of the keys, is when you believe in yourself and you believe that you can handle it, and you talk to yourself in that way. That's when the real progress happens. And for me, honestly, I thought about it. I thought, what's the worst that's going to happen? What's the worst that could happen? I could lose everything and go back and live in a one-bedroom apartment again. I'd have to sell a bunch of stuff and get rid of a bunch of stuff. And I thought, would that be so bad? Would it be so bad? I have a lot less stress. Yeah, it would suck, but at that moment I said, let's do it. And so far, knock on wood, it's been good. But I was afraid of losing everything, and I thought, what is everything as long as I have my health? So I changed my perspective in it, and it helped me get through that. And yeah, it's the crazy thing that we have about being safe.
Yeah, playing it safe is not living. Every single time, and I get out of my comfort zone, and I do that thing that I'm scared to death of, or that freaks me out, it is the greatest high. It is the most liberating feeling. It is the most free. It is high on life at its finest. Is to know that you had, something that really was like, I mean, some of these fears are really gripping, debilitating fears that we have. And to be able to go, oh my gosh, look what I did. And it's like such a gift, the other side of it, like life really does begin at the end of your comfort zone. Like it opens up a whole new world. And so I think I lock into those memories. I lock into those times, like when I was scared to death to do something and I did it, and like, holy crap, what that opened up for me. And so it's like anytime I'm faced with that fear, it's like having, that anchor to remember that. But that's true living. True living is to not play small and settle and status quo and settle for mediocrity and safe and boring and safe and boring. And did I say safe and boring? Like really, like the adrenaline rush of the other side of fear is to me like better than anything. It's just the greatest. You've said yes to your life in a way that rewards you big time. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like we we all do public speaking, and they say that's the biggest fear. They say people would rather be dead than giving the eulogy at a funeral, and it always blows my mind. And it's like, why would you be? I mean, I understand it's the big thing that everybody's looking at you and everybody's judging you. What are you wearing? How are you talking? But when you let that go, there's everybody's got a message, and I think it's so important. I hate to see people, just like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna, like you said, live small and just get out there. And it's so amazing when you can share your gift with the world and be able to overcome that stuff. And I know for me that I was watching Brandy. I don't know, you guys, Brandy in our mastermind. She did a hang gliding thing. She had a video up on Facebook. And I was nervous. I could feel my body's reaction watching her get hooked into this thing. And then they ran, and then they jumped off, and I was like, oh my God. And the words I was using, I was paying attention. The words I was using in my brain were like, oh my God, I couldn't do that. I would freeze. I would shit myself. I would, And then I saw them flying, and I'm like, how cool is that? That is pretty awesome that they just flew off a cliff, and they're cruising around and looking at all the beauty and everything. I thought, would I want to be sitting there going, oh, I'm so scared of I mean, yeah, can we crash? Sure. but what's the other side of that, and what's the likelihood of that versus seeing the beauty? I mean, I remember when I got in a helicopter for the first time, I was scared shitless. I don't like heights. I don't like little things with little propellers. And I got in there, and we did a helicopter thing in the Grand Canyon, and I told myself, what I could have missed all this beauty by this fear of, and so I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, just you got to change the lingo you use.
Yeah, you have to switch the what ifs, right? Because whenever we're in fear, we're operating out of the what if, worst case scenario, right? What if all hell breaks loose? What if, all of that. But, and that's when you're coming from that space of, fuck everything and run fear, right? But when you're locked into the feeling excited and ready, that acronym for fear, feeling excited and ready, you're coming from a series of what ifs of what if, like holy crap, like that is, what if that happens, and what if that opens that door, and oh my gosh, what could that look like, right? So it's about transforming our fear, just transforming it. And anyway, that's my tips for transforming fear and operating from the different series of what ifs. Christopher Rausch.
Carol?
I think it's one of the things, the first step in working with fear is to acknowledge that there is fear, that we do have fear. And my process of going into the nature of fear is to really allow, actually to exaggerate the hell out of it. So if I'm feeling fear, I don't particularly name it I don't give it a label. I just allow myself to go into the nature of the feeling of it, and as I've done that, all the different ways in which I'm fearful come up naturally, and I look at that and I acknowledge that, and I look at the evidence of whether or not anything negative has come out of that fear in the past. And so, for instance, did we lose you, Chris? So, for instance, fear of speaking. Well, what is the nature of the fear of speaking for me? It was fear of not being accepted, not being seen, not being heard, being judged. And we can't control what another does or says. We can only be there and acknowledge and present for ourselves. So one of the things that you and I talked about, Audra, was just allowing for what is happening in the moment to be, and allow for the fact that we are going to make mistakes, that we're going to forget what we're going to say, because we're in our head, right, oftentimes. So when we had that conversation a while back, that really helped me to just be and flow with others. I mean, even what we're doing now, people would be afraid to do what we're doing now. We're doing everything off the cuff and very spontaneous. We don't know from one second to the next what's going to come out of our mouths. And so when we operate from a place of just being who we are in the present moment and not thinking about the past or thinking about the future, that is when there is no fear. But we have to acknowledge that there is fear sometimes, and that we are coming from the past and we're coming from the future, like you said, the what ifs, and we're trying to figure out all the different scenarios that could come up when they probably wouldn't come up at all. But so that's how I've learned to work with my own fears, to really just fully acknowledge that they exist, and then go into the feeling of it and allow it to be, and then just be as present as I can with it. Because when I've done that, it's the fear is dissipated and gone away. I'm not saying that I don't have fear still. Like you were saying before, Chris, I have a fear of the way I die, not the fact that my body is going to deteriorate. But that process, what does that process look like? Am I going to die in pain or whatever? I don't want me as a being to be experiencing that. So I've been really exploring those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what you said was key about, you know, it's really when you just embrace your own vulnerability and acknowledging, you know what, I'm scared shitless right now. I'm afraid. I'm, you know, petrified. This is what is coming up for me. And you claim and you own it and you let it have its airspace. That's when you can transform it. And it's really just acknowledging without judgment or label, right? So it's like, you know, I think when the fear comes up, we think it's not supposed to. We're not supposed to be afraid. Why am I afraid? This isn't, you know, because it's not the most comfortable feeling. But it's like any emotion, and we talked about emotions on other hangouts. You know, it's like just allowing whatever to surface for you, and let it give you the feedback that it wants to give you, and that's all it is. Our emotions, whether it's fear or any emotion that we have, it's just feedback. It's feedback surfacing for us so that we can make a choice for our life that's going to honor our soul and our spirit. And it's just, you know, being with whatever that is and really unpacking it and seeing what's really under it, that you can free up that space and you can get over your fears and owning it. Like you know, for me, my greatest fear, talking like you were saying about speaking on stage, that was my greatest fear and still is. Like, I'm going to Ecuador in June and teaching at a university, right? Like, speaking, you know, in another country again, and still like, oh my gosh, like have the same fear, like you'd think it was my first time ever speaking. But I know that I'm going to grow through it. I know that it's so exhilarating to know that I don't allow that fear now just to keep me safe and on the side. You know, that I'm still friggin' afraid, and I own it and express it and acknowledge it, and I get to do it. I get to move through it and celebrate it. And I so speak to that part of fear right now. You know, like, you know how people say, oh, the more you do it, you know, anything, you know, that kind of goes away. But I wonder if that's true in some situations. Like, I don't know. I wonder if I'm always going to have that fear, you know, around that. What do you think of that, you guys? What's your opinion on that?
Well, Carly Simon, which is a singer, she has stage fright every single time she gets out there, she says, and she's been a phenomenal Grammy-winning, award-winning singer for the past 40-plus years. And so for some people it may never dissipate. For others, you know, the more practice we have in doing it, sometimes it does go away. And I think if we really, I think it can, but sometimes it doesn't, and we have to be okay with that, whatever it turns out to be. Just like you said before, acknowledging it in the present moment is the very thing that dissolves it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true, because when I actually, you know, owned it, thank goodness it's part of my message, so it's easier to own it in that capacity. But like, truly, that's come up, you know, like the whole deer in the headlights thing of like, have you ever just like glazed over and you're like, holy crap, what was I saying? You know, like, oh my God, you know, it's like you're doing good, and then it's like all of a sudden you have that, like, do you know where you are right now? And then you're like, freezes you, right? And but to just own that even and go, you know what, holy crap, I'm totally having one of those moments. And it's awesome. Once you call it out on the carpet, you're just like, whew, you freed the monkey. You like let him out. You let him out of the cage and he can go run off now, right? So yeah, it's amazing. It's really, really cool. And that's the power of vulnerability. It's the power of owning your space, whatever space you're in, and like just letting it be real and rise. You know, that's why I'm so committed to true authentic self-expression, because that is what like lets us be high on life, because we don't have that energy that bogs us down and holds us back.
Yep.
Yeah, it's for me it's you know, talking about public speaking, people ask me all the time, they're like, don't you get afraid, don't you get nervous before you go on stage? I mean, we're going to be at, you know, the event this coming Thursday, and I'm going to be standing in front of 500 people or 400 people, and it's like I don't have a fear. I mean, I got more nervous today speaking in front of kids, and I say nervous, not fear, but I got nervous. But I think for me, when I go back and I think about fear, like, you know, people say I'm afraid of the dentist or I'm afraid of the doctor. It's like, well, okay, let's break that down. You know, I may not like the dentist, I may not like, but what's the converse of that if we don't? You know, it's like if we pollute ourselves and say, oh, I'm afraid of the dentist, then we don't go to the dentist, and then what happens eventually? Our teeth fall out, and then people don't like us, and we're afraid to go outside, and it becomes this vicious cycle of everything, as opposed to saying, okay, what's going to happen? But for me, it's like having that confidence and that trust. And you guys have heard me say it 1,000 times, everything happens for a reason, and what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. I mean, I got, for our viewers out there, it's on my arm. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And if I trust in the fact that everything I'm going through and the decisions I make and the chances I take and the risks I go with are meant to happen for a reason, for me, it gives me that validation that, okay, you know, if something does happen, you know, in my core thing with this is that, will I survive? Will I survive? If I went hang gliding and crashed and became, you know, a paraplegic, would I survive? How is that gonna impact me? Versus the thrill of going out there and just doing the things that we're supposedly afraid of. And one of the things when I put the picture up on the thing, the biggest thing that helped me was this book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, by Susan Jeffers. So for you guys out there watching, I love books. This book changed my perspective about everything, because the core of it was, will I survive? We're afraid of what happens.
Dying.
And it's like, yeah, it's like, feel the fear and do it anyway. And it was a fabulous book for me, because now I trust in those things. I mean, yeah, have I gone skydiving? No. I had an opportunity to do it 6 years ago, and I chickened out. It was like, I don't want to go up in a perfectly good airplane and jump out of it, you know. And I thought, okay, is it I'm afraid, or is it that I just don't care for it? And I think if we label something as a fear, then that paralyzes. But if we sit there and say, you know what, geez, I just don't care for it. I don't like that feeling of being up in a thing, you know. And it's amazing how you can live life, because I know you guys have seen it, and I've talked to people. One minute they're living life in this comfort zone, the next minute they get diagnosed with cancer, and then suddenly they're not afraid of shit. It's like, hey, what are you gonna do? Oh, I'm gonna go jump out of a plane. I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna get a tattoo. And it's like, so what changed for you? It's the mindset. It's that, wow, you know, what have I got to lose? And I think that's important for people to get through their mind, to be able to just go out there and live, because at the end of the day, when you're going through that death, are you going to look back on your life and go, holy shit, what a ride? Or are you going to go, wow, I played it safe and I still wound up in this spot anyway? You know, what's better? And you know, it's a process we all have to go through.
I hear Gloria Gaynor up in here. At first I was afraid. And speaking to, you know, what you just said about label something as fear and it paralyzes us, that is so true. We have to stop telling the story that we're afraid, I'm afraid. Like, I have to stop saying, I'm scared to death to speak on, I'm so afraid of the book. You know, we have to tell a new empowering story around it. I mean, we don't want to obviously put Febreze on a turd again, but truly stop telling the story about it. Like, instead, like, you know what, it's exhilarating after I, you know, get on stage and I did that, you know, and so start telling that story. Or, oh my gosh, I love it when I'm afraid of something, and on the other side, it's, you know, instead of the I'm afraid, that's just that reprograms us that we, and conditions that in our DNA that we are afraid of that. You have to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
What was that?
We have to tell a new story. We have to tell a
Tell.
story. We have to tell a story, a more empowering story around our fears. Or we're going to continue to fuel it by that.
Mm-hmm. It's like claustrophobia. I consider myself claustrophobic, but I really haven't met anybody who really doesn't say, "Oh man, I get a thrill out of being in really tight spaces." And like I was telling you guys before, I went for an MRI today, and I did the open MRI. But what was my brain saying before? It's like, "Oh God, I'm going to be in this thing, and this thing's going to be right here." And I could have chosen to be paranoid and fearful, but it's like, Chris, it's nothing. It's a thing right in front of your face. Yeah, you got to stay still for 45 minutes. And I sat there and I worked through my logic for a second. I'm like, I can do this. This is not a big deal. And I laid down and I just closed my eyes and I said, I'm going to have this opportunity for 45 minutes to just be able to relax. And I didn't even think about it. Sure, a couple times it popped into my head, geez, I can't move, and wow, what if? And for a second, then I just went, you know what? It's not a big deal, Chris. It's not a big deal. Why am I going to sit there and get worked up over it for something that's nothing's going to happen?
So you're not claustrophobic?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't care for being in tight spaces, and I think it's changed a little bit in my life because I think it comes down to, again, that fear of dying. I think when we let go of that, and that's what I'm really, like Carol, I'm really trying to let go of that thing, and I'm reading books about, Sandra Champlain's book, we don't die, and it's making me feel a little bit more comfortable about, whatever's going to why am I going to sit there and live like, okay, am I going to get cancer, or am I going to get hit by a car, or whatever's, it's going to happen. And some people say it's already been written, and the more I let go of that and just kind of go, God, am I living in the moment? My big thing right now, I think I've told you guys, is just be in the moment. That's all we have. Being in the past and thinking about all that crap and like, oh, shoulda, coulda, woulda, and blah, blah, blah. I'm 46 years old, and I kind of freak myself out. It's like, well, shit, if the last 20 years go as fast as if the next 20 years go as fast as the last 20 years, oh my God, and you get into this, what if, and it's like, right now is a pretty kick-ass moment. We're sitting here broadcasting all over the world, talking to people, sharing our thoughts and feelings. That's pretty cool. I don't think we live in the moment enough, and I think that fear, we label that stuff, and it's like, it bugs me when I see people saying, I'm afraid to fall in love again because I've been hurt, and it's like, you know what? Well, if you don't let yourself feel that, then what kind of life are you going to live? I mean, you're going to live a life where you're sitting by yourself watching, reruns of House of Cards and whatever and eating bomb bands? Or are you going to go out there and try again and say, you know what, the more no's and the more failures I go through is the more opportunity I'm going to get to a spot where I'm going to find what it is that I deserve. And sometimes I think about, this is my question to you guys, do you think it's sometimes that we feel we don't deserve certain things, so we limit it by labeling it as a fear?
Oh, that's a deep question.
I go deep, baby. I go deep.
Uh-huh. Okay. So I think that there's layers to everything. There's layers to our fears, and there are some layers that could reveal a feeling of unworthiness. So absolutely, I believe that could be part of it, and yeah. That's part of acknowledging it. What am I really afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of this. And then you peel back the layers, and then it really boils down to what's really stopping you. And that's when those things surface. Like, why don't you feel like you're worthy of that? And, and it goes back. I mean, it just goes so far back. Like we were talking about, our fears whenever they were created, whenever that. It seems like it's a lack and it's a loss. Like the framework that we operate from is there's not enough, right? Or something's going to be taken away. So fear is like it involves some form of loss. I'm either not going to get acceptance, that's going to be taken away, right? Or any of that. It's to come back to the place of truth where there's more than enough. Love it's all encompassing. It's all around us. It's never goes away from us. We go away from it. Anyway, that's what I got for that.
Carol, what do you think?
Well, I don't know if we just label something fear because we feel unworthy or anything like that. I think unworthiness is a product of fear, that we won't be accepted, that we won't have enough, like you were saying, Audra. All those things are just naturally products of fear and products of feeling that lack. Feeling the lack is a product of fear. When we haven't felt loved enough, when we haven't felt heard enough, when we haven't felt seen enough, they're all products of fear. And when we acknowledge that and see it for what it is, then we can work with it. But when we constantly avoid it and repress it and push it away, like it wasn't there, but it really is, it just rears its head in so much fear that it takes us over. And when we see something for what it is, it dissipates or dissolves.
No, go ahead.
No, I forgot that I put on the Facebook thing if anybody had any questions to email me or message me, so I was just checking to see if anybody were watching this and had any questions, but they so far don't. But go ahead.
I was thinking, you know, right after we had our last discussion and we decided that we were going to have the topic of fear for today's hangout, it was right when I was getting ready to do my Spartan race, my very first Spartan sprint. You see all that I did that, right? That it was my first obstacle race. And it was so, it was just the most amazing metaphor for us in life as humans and the obstacles, and it was just amazing. And like I didn't do my homework before I went. I just was like, I'm just gonna show up and do my best, and I'm gonna have fun. Like my outcome was to have fun, show up, do my best. But I didn't go on and research the obstacles and see what I was really up against, right? Or what I was going to be confronted with. And I'm glad I didn't. I just said, you know what, I'm just going to show up and do my best. So I didn't want to have that all there, you know, for me. So, but when I went there, it was like we did it as a team, and it was amazing to see how we all have certain strengths and certain weaknesses, right? Like, you know, really, I was great in running, you know, but when it came to, you know, carrying the 20-pound jug of water up the bleachers, like, I friggin' struggled, you know, like, really struggled, and had help. Somebody came along and said, you know what, this girl, I didn't even know, she wasn't even on my team, my water was spilling, her water had spilled out, she goes, here, give me some of yours. And so it's like, wow, she kind of carried that for me. And then there was times when, you know, somebody else had a challenge and an obstacle. Like this one girl was going up the thing, and it was heights. It was up high, and she was deathly afraid. She was like, oh my gosh, she's afraid of heights. And just to see other people's fears and to experience that and just see that we're all human and that we all have, you know, fear. We all have something, right? And was just huge for me. And just to see that we all have some kind of fear. And if we can just support each other with that. And I don't know why I'm telling this story. Just it made me think of it because it was just, I know that it was right after we had our conversation about fear that we decided to do this topic, and it was wild just to see people's fears playing out. Fear of, oh my God, I don't want to let my own fear that surfaced, like, crap, I'm holding the team back because I can't jump rope with a freaking dock line, right, with the rubber band tied around my ankle.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, it was just wild. I don't know. I don't know if it stood out for me because we had just had our hangout about fear, and that I was noticing that. But yeah, it was just wild to observe that. What are you guys doing? You're like all monkeying around, and she went away. Am I boring?
No, my blinds on my window were open. I noticed it was like washing me out. But when we got about 10 minutes left, and thinking about what are some of the solutions about it. I wanted to see what you guys thought about. And I struggle with this myself when I'm trying to help people. Is like do you think that baby steps are good ways to overcome fear, or do you think just getting all in? I mean, obviously there probably is a combination of both, but I'm just kind of curious because sometimes I think, okay, we'll take baby steps, and then sometimes I think, no, just do it. Just, you know, if you're gonna jump out of a plane, jump out of a plane. Don't go to an indoor skydiving thing first, or, you know, I keep using that because that's a thing I got to get over, or I should get over. I don't have to get over it. But what do you guys think about baby steps versus just getting in there and just doing it?
I think there's a sorry. I think it's a combination. I think there's a combination. You know, sometimes we can't miss steps, and when it's something that we're going to have, like for instance, teaching a class. When you haven't taught a class before, there's a lot of fear in how you're going to present it and whether people will be able to hear the information, whether you'll present it in such a way that people will understand it. Will you be able to adequately answer questions so that they can understand you? All these different things that come up with when you're about to teach a class that you've never taught before. You know the material, but you haven't taught somebody. Teaching and knowing something are two different animals. And so I remember when I was teaching astrology, those were my biggest fears. Will I be able to answer the questions that people have in such a way that they'll receive it and understand it? And so because I hadn't taught, it was natural for me to have those fears. But I put off teaching for a very long time. But I had to acknowledge that maybe I just wasn't ready. You know, there are times when we're just not ready to do something, and we have to allow for that. And then there are other times when we are ready, but we're just putting it off because we're afraid of, like I just said, sometimes not being able to answer the questions or whatever. I was ready, and I was being told I was ready by people that know me and that have worked with me and that have experienced my work. And so I was just holding myself back. So in that situation, I decided to just jump in. So there's a combination of the two. It's acknowledging that you are ready or acknowledging that you're not ready yet, and then taking those steps to get ready and be ready. And then when you are ready to just, you know, jump in, because you have to do it sometime, and you won't get better and better at something if you don't do it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes we might be ready and the universe says no. God says no, right? It might not be the right timing, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I totally agree, Carol. Right.
So what other suggestions do you guys have for our viewers as far as overcoming their fears, and maybe a couple of examples of fears that, you know, are commonplace? And I think we kind of addressed it, but what do you guys think about opportunities for people to walk away from this and be able to implement in their life?
You want to go, Carol?
Sure. We've talked a lot about public speaking, but it's not only in public speaking that we have fears. We have fears about being intimate with our friends and family and the ones closest to us, and how do we get around that? I had a fear of people leaving me if I spoke my mind and told them how I was feeling about a certain situation that happened between us. So I had to really look at that and acknowledge that fear, and still approach that person with how I was feeling. And when I finally did that, and they didn't leave, that made it easier and easier for me to, in the future, be able to talk to people that I was close with and that mattered to me about being honest and authentic. Because when we don't go into those scary places with people that we care about, that we need to, all those fears are compounded, and they hold us back from being with one another in the most intimate way possible, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. And it's once we do it and we see that we're not going to be rejected, or we see that we're not going to be abandoned or anything like that, because it goes back to abandonment issues as a child. It did for me. And so when I really took that step and I didn't die and I didn't lose them as a friend, I said, oh, okay, so I can continue to do this, and I just have to be myself and accept fully what is going to happen. I can't take responsibility for another's reactions, responses, or anything like that. I can take responsibility for how I feel, and I can take responsibility for how I present it, but I can't take responsibility for another's response or reaction.
And a big thing about that, Carol, is if they reject us, then they're not our people. And that's when I remember, you know, I can't remember if it's Glenn Morshower or somebody else. If they reject, if we bare our souls to somebody and we do that vulnerability thing, if they reject us, then they're not our people, and that just opens up that spot for the people that we do want in our life. I mean, me going from suit and tie speaker to this, you know, people are like, oh, well, I don't like profanity, and I think, speakers should wear a suit and tie, and everybody, and it's like, well, then you're not my people. It's okay. Go find people you like. Quit looking at me and saying, well, you should do this and you should do this. Don't waste your time. And that was scary for me, but also I had to trust in myself that I'm a good person, and that hopefully people will gosh darn it, like me and love me. But yeah, they're not your people if that happens, in my opinion.
That's the truth right there. Your vibe equals your tribe, my friend. And yeah, everybody else can have their own. They can find their own, and that's what we have to let go of. Is trusting that we're not alone. Whatever that deepest fear is, it's like, ask it. Like that would be my tip, is like in transforming the energy dynamic around fears. Like when that surfaces, what is it that I need? Right? Just asking, what do I need right now? Well, I need to feel safe. What am I afraid of? So what is it that I'm really afraid of? Okay, well, I'm afraid, I will choke. Okay, so if you choke, then what? Well, I'm afraid they, will laugh at me. Okay, what if they laugh at you? Well, then I made somebody laugh. It's just like you just kind of unpack that whole thing, and then you're just like, oh, and you just go to the worst case scenario. But then, but then checking back in with yourself, like, what is it that I need to feel safe and okay around this? What is it that I need, how can I take care of myself in this moment? Give myself whatever that is that I need that I'm afraid I'm not going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So, just checking in. Check in with you.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Yep.
So happy Friday. I think we're done.
Yeah, I think we're done. Hope you guys enjoyed it out there, and it brought up some things for you to take a look at and to think about. And as always, if you have any questions or you want to talk to any of us, feel free to go to our Facebook group. You can enter your suggestions, comments, questions, whatever, and it's 3 sides of the coin, and it's the numeral 3, so it's the number 3 sides of the coin in Facebook. And my website is carolpilkington.com. It's right down there underneath my name if you want to contact me, and the same for the other two, for Audra and Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Peace, peeps.
Awesome.
Thanks
we love
for
you guys,
joining.
and get out there and overcome your fears, and get people around you that are going to be there to support you and help you and push you. And those are the people you want in your life. But just educate yourself. I mean, I keep flashing the book, but this book changed the way I thought about things. So get out there and say, okay, what's the rationalization behind this, and just go for it and live your life.
Yeah, what? Yeah. Bye, you guys.
Peace out,
See
people.
ya.